we look for openings. There's ideas like a mother-in-law's apartment. I know a family that has a mother-in-law's apartment where their daughter goes to her own apartment in the basement. The 2-bedroom apartment, she can lock the door, she can close the door, she can have a live-in staff if she wants to, she can be by herself if she wants to. There's examples where people have duplexes. Maybe the parents live on one side and the people with disabilities live on the other side. There might be some assistive technology or monitoring devices that could be in the part of the duplex with the people with disabilities to help monitor. There's maybe a 4-plex, 4 apartments in one building, or scattered apartments in a larger building. So a 4-plex might not have all people with disabilities. It might have one apartment with people with disabilities, another apartment with elderly folks, another apartment with people from the general public, and maybe a relative or something like that. I've seen people modify a garage and revamp it so it looks like a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment and it's 7 feet away from their brother. Obviously, you can rent an apartment.
Oh. Sorry, he muted. I think
there we go. Yep, I'm back. There's a neighborhood housing group. So I've seen more and more groups of parents come together and talk to me about wanting to build one house. And that's kind of not an option right now, but you can have a neighborhood of houses, a neighborhood of condominiums, and that might work well. In Plymouth, there's a woman there, her name is Indu, and she has 4 to 5 condominiums in a neighborhood in Plymouth. People with autism live there. They have the staff in the neighborhood as well. They all eat lunch together at the same time in one of the buildings. Each of the building has a theme. One is for massage, another is for sensory integration, another is for another kind of programming. They are super creative. They even have a motorhome as kind of a perk for people or an incentive. And during COVID, it was really nice. You could go out in the motorhome, go to malls or restaurants, and then come back and wash their hands. Or if people with autism were fearful about going out, they would like the motorhome. It was familiar to them and they could go out and about. You can also buy your own home. You can buy a condominium. There's first-time home buyer money available in many of the cities and the state of Minnesota through land trusts and first-time home buyer money and incentive money from different cities. And there's some new services through Waiver Reimagined that we're going to talk about and that I got some questions about, called integrated community support, where the provider controls the apartment building, maybe owns the apartment building, and people in the building live there, and the staff are in the building to support the people with disabilities. So there's lots of options for people. All right, there we go. So we have an array of services. We're going to talk about licensed housing, where the provider licenses the home under a law called 245D. We have these new options through Waiver Reimagined, which is other provider controlled housing, other provider controlled options. And we have participant controlled housing. In Minnesota, we call that own home, where the person owns their home, they rent an apartment, they own a condominium, and they choose to have a housemate or not, and they choose a provider that's going to provide them support within that situation. In that situation, it's not a licensed setting because it's their own home. First of all, licensed services, licensed housing. There's a number of services available. Some of these are very familiar to us. Some are more appropriate for people with disabilities and less appropriate for people with disabilities. So nursing homes would not be the most appropriate option for people with disabilities, but we all might go there sometime to recover from an injury, from an accident, from an illness, and then we can leave that facility and go to someplace that we choose to go to. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear so.
Intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities. Those are still out there. Those are group homes or community residential settings that are more of an institutional model because they have nursing, they have a dietitian, they have fire drills at different times during the day. The dietitian develops all the meals, etc. And so they might be larger in number, maybe 10, or they might be smaller in number, maybe 6. And so those are options that are available right now, and there might be openings. Community residential settings is the fancy word for group home. We all kind of think of the classic group home where you might have 2 people and 4 people with disabilities living in a house in the suburbs. And so we call those community residential settings. Through Waiver Reimagine, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, Family Residential Services was previously called Family Foster Care. Now we call it Family Residential Services. So that could be a mom and a dad or a person sharing their home. And the home is basically the eats and the sheets, not the programming, but you can build on that and add support services to family foster care, so you have teaching and training in addition to that. Some services that we're not as familiar with might be customized living. Customized living has typically been for people on a CADI waiver or nursing home level of care, not so much the developmental disabilities waiver, but they could be an option where it's a kind of an apartment building, and within the building there are services. Often people eat in a congregate style in a cafeteria, or they could have meals in their apartment. There's nursing that is available. There's other services available kind of a la carte off of a menu. So if you needed help with med administration, you could purchase that. If you needed help with bathing, you could purchase that. If you needed help with homemaking, you could purchase that. There's not a teaching component with customized living. It's more of a care. Another relatively new option that has a couple names, life sharing or share a home options, are available through Lutheran Social Services, Abelite, which used to be called Bethesda, they changed their name to Abelite, and Accord, which used to be called Community Involvement Programs, and now it's called Accord. So a lot of time is spent with life sharing in matching the person with a disability to the staff or the house parent in the home. That's kind of the key, is to match, to find a good match of people that like to spend time together, that have similar interests and similar things they want to do with their spare time. So all these so far are places to live. They're most often licensed settings. The few options we have in the bottom are options we have now for services in your home or in the community. So we have individualized home supports with training and without training. Without training, with training, and family training. That is what used to be called personal support and in-home family support. Through Waiver Reimagine, they changed the name. They consolidated some services into one name, and that is hourly or daily services in the parent's home. Integrated community supports is that new service through Waiver Reimagine, where you live in a building controlled by the provider, and staff are in the building providing supports to you, teaching, training, mentoring, challenging you to be as independent as possible. Most of us have heard about personal care or PCA services. Those are the kind of entry-level service that people with a higher physical need or medical need often use, and sometimes you can get more hours through personal care tenant services if you have a physical need, or than you can through maybe a home and community-based waiver. So we kind of move on to other provider-controlled housing. And the newest one, and I'm going to spend a few slides on this to kind of explain it because it's a new service. And it's something that we as county staff are learning and getting our arms around as well, because it is a new service. So integrated community support is provider controlled. So it means that the provider owns the building with apartments in it, or they have some kind of control. Maybe they have an apartment they rent for staff in the building, or maybe they can help fill the building up and the owner has given them permission to do that. It's for people who are 18 years or older. It's one-to-one service providing training, teaching, training, educating, but it's not providing direct care. So if you need physical care or personal care attendant services, it probably isn't the option for you. This is for people that need direction, cooking, direction, cleaning, direction, and support doing these things, or guidance, specifically cueing them, giving them an idea what to do first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Skill maintenance, making sure their skills are consistent over time. They're always sorting their whites and their darks in the laundry. Guidance, helping them with decisions, and instruction, teaching them new skills. Assistance with activities of daily living, assistance with teaching them about bathing, dressing, grooming, but it's not about helping them directly. It's not about direct care. And assistance with coordinating community learning activities, living activities, and direct supervision. So in this case, again, the provider owns, operates, or leases the apartment. They have a direct or indirect financial interest in the property, or they might have a financial relationship with the property owner. They certify the building. A lot of providers now, like Fraser, Hammer, a few others, are certifying buildings that they worked in before. And once they're certified, that specific provider is the only provider that can offer that service in that building. You can have other services in other apartments, but if you're choosing integrated community support, it's the only provider that can offer that in that building. There was a question earlier. We have a few questions and answers in a little minute, but the question was, does the rate cover 24-hour care? So it does say it covers 24-hour care, but only if it would be direct support, teaching, and cueing. It's not about standby assistance or somebody being in the building just in case something happens. It's not about, again, bathing, dressing, grooming, but it's about teaching and training. So it's probably not going to be common that people have 24-hour care needs, although it's listed in a definition. So again, integrated community support is about teaching. It's not doing hands-on care for the individual. So that is a big difference between living in a group home or living in your own home. Those staff and those services can do direct care as well as teaching. In this situation, they're teaching, they're not doing direct care. It covers training and support to meet the person's needs. It covers participating in the community, health and safety and wellness, household management, and adaptive skills. If you live or have a housemate in an integrated community support apartment, you don't have to receive integrated community support. So if you had a friend that was your housemate or roommate living with you, or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they didn't need services, that was fine. They don't have to have services. Integrated community support services, you can have them, but you can have a housemate if you want to that doesn't have them. So just kind of a few more pieces of information, because this is a new service. I don't spend this much time on the other services, but I'm gonna kind of dive a little deeper with this one. You can add services to integrated community support. So you're living in an apartment, you can add, in addition, using your budget, you can add PCA services if you need them. You can add homemaker services to help you with cooking, cleaning, dusting, and you can add home delivered meals. Those are 3 services you can add. And the services cannot duplicate each other. So PCA, I guess, should be offered first, and then looking at other services as well. There's a list of services you cannot have when you're using integrated community supports. And these services, many of them are used for your own home. Many of them are used in a licensed setting. So 24-hour emergency assistance is a service you cannot have with integrated community support. The idea is staff are in the building, so if you need help, staff are going to be around and available. Adult foster care would be a different setting. That's a house that's licensed as adult foster care, so that wouldn't be okay. Community residential services is a group home, so that's kind of a duplication, and it wouldn't be okay with integrated community supports. Customized living, it's another kind of a program that we mentioned earlier, where the person has an apartment and meals are available in the program, and nursing and other services are available. There's a really nice service for living on your own or with a housemate called Caregiver Living Expenses, where the waiver pays for the rent and food of the caregiver. That's not an option through this service either, because rent and food are paid through a different mechanism. Family foster care or family residential services or individualized home supports with or without training or night supervision or respite are not options for integrated community supports. Some quick questions and answers. These were some that were submitted to me earlier. Can people have integrated community supports 24/7? So the answer is a quiet yes, but the rate does not cover 24 hours a day unless it's 24 hours of one-to-one direct support, which is training and queuing. It's not standby assistance and it's not direct care. So you have to add other services, maybe like PCA or home anchor, but otherwise it wouldn't be, it'd be more of an exception, I think. How are staff provided in this program? They're in the building, they work with the person one-to-one, they provide skill building and instructional services to help the person maintain their living in the community. How is food and cooking handled? So it's a little different. People cook in their own apartment and they receive help as needed. If they're an independent cook, they just make their meals on their own. If they need help and assistance, a staff within the hours that are allocated can help them cook. They go grocery shopping, potentially with staff or with friends, like you and I would. The food isn't provided by the provider, like it might be in a group home. This would be an option where you'd be shopping for yourself, picking out what you want, maybe developing a menu. Can integrated supports help you with bathing, dressing, and grooming? The answer is no, it cannot, because it's about teaching and training only. It's not direct care. PCR homemaker services can be added to the plan. And does it direct or what is it? A lot of questions, parents have had a lot of questions about what does this direct or indirect control mean? Financial interest, what does that mean? And so it means that the provider could own the building, or they could rent an apartment within the building, or they could have an arrangement with the owner of the building to help fill the apartments. They have some kind of a direct or indirect control of the property. They also certify the buildings if they're providing services. And again, they're the only provider, whoever certified the building, that's able to provide integrated community supports for that building. So I know we're moving kind of fast, but we have a lot of information. And I'm happy to answer questions at the end, or feel free to email me questions. I can answer those as well. A third option is participant-controlled housing. And so this in Minnesota is called your own home. This is where you have an apartment, you bought a condominium, you live with a friend, you live with a significant other. You choose the provider, you choose who's going to do what, who's going to go grocery shopping with you, who's going to mow the lawn, who's going to pick up your medication. It might be you, it might be your mom, it might be the staff. And so you have more autonomy over that. With your own home, it's not a licensed setting. Your own home, you can have 24-hour care, which is a great thing, but it's not a licensed setting. You have control of your home. You're the one that pays the rent. You're the one that can turn the temperature up or down on the wall. You're the one that pays utilities and water bill, those kinds of things. You choose your own service provider. And some families, again, have gotten together as a group of 10 families and they want to work with one provider and 10 families. And that's really not what own home is. Own home is, I'm going to work with my provider. You work with your provider. The third person will work with their provider. There might be times that we're going to share staff, and that's okay as long as all of us agree we might share staff, but it's not the intent to duplicate what a group home looks like. It's not the intent to have one provider for 5 or 10 families at once. That's more or less looking like integrated community support or looking like a group home, and the state is discouraging people to do that. So when we meeting with people with housing is really an individual process where we really ask questions about where do you want to live? How do you see your situation benefiting you? What is your vision? What's your dream? And then from that, we can work together to talk about what's possible and allowable and what's maybe not allowable within waivered services. If you're not using waiver money, you can do anything you want. You can have 20 people live in one house. It's not a big deal. But when waiver money is used, then the Department of Human Services has certain size and setting rules that are guidelines for us that we have to kind of abide by. So let's see, it's not a wraparound service, your own home, or a situation where several families use one provider. You can have 24-hour care 7 days a week if you have that in your budget, if that's part of your assessed need. A thing to know about own home is that when staff are not available, when there's a staffing crisis, when staff don't show up, most often the family members are the backup for the staffing versus the agency. That's a really important piece to know before you get into looking at own home. If you live in a community residential setting, if there's a staff shortage, people are going to show up within the company. It might be the clerical staff, it might be the program director, it might be the director. They have to fill those shifts in a licensed group home setting. In integrated community sports, it's probably similar to that, where if you have a staff need, they need to provide that. With own home, since it is your own home and you're providing in-home services, the family members are the backup people. You won't see that from the Disability Services Program Manual. It's not written through the Department of Human Services, but I've experienced that through the years with families that have used own home. So it's something to consider, something to think about. So some expectations of your own home are that the person has their own lease, they have their own home, the person has their own bedroom, their bathroom, their kitchen. It's all separate, just like a typical apartment. It can't just be a room, of course. They choose if they have a housemate or not. We're going to talk about how funding happens and how you get more money than Social Security to pay for rent and for food. You obviously have to have your own key. You can decorate and furnish your apartment as you wish. And these are kind of criteria for most programs, even group homes. You should be able to have your own key and decorate your area, your living area, the way you want to. You control your own schedule and activities. You have access to food and kitchen. You buy your own food. People can visit you anytime. You're free to have any service provider you choose. And if they're not working out, you can choose another provider. This is the nice part. When I was an advocate at ARC, like 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, I guess, I would often do appeals because people were getting kicked out of group homes because they had challenging behavior. Well, this is a nice option because if you have your own home, you're choosing the provider. And if it's not working out, you choose another provider. You get to stay where you're living in the place that you own or the place that you rent, and the provider moves on, you find another provider. Again, staff are the family sometimes, and they're often the backup when staff aren't available or there's openings in the schedule.
I'm just going to mention real quick
yes.
that this PowerPoint, of course, will be sent out. I understand it's probably pretty tough to read if you can read it at all on some of those smaller slides. So thank you for patience with that, and we'll send out a copy, but he's talking pretty directly from those bullet points. Thanks, Jerry.
Trying to get as many of the bullet points as possible, the important ones anyway, without reading it directly. So another question I ask is, where do you want to live? And I'm going to give you some tools to help you find out where you want to live, to help you, determine where there might be openings or things like that. So one of the nicer options, I guess, is through Metro Crisis Coordination Program, MCCP. They have a website called minnesotaopenings.org, and you can look at this website. You can click 15 miles away, 100 miles away, how many miles away, and search by location. And the second page gives you a little bit more information. So if you were looking at this website, you clicked on the second page, you click 15 miles away, which I did. And I'm looking for a group home, a community residential setting. Formerly, they're called supported living services. And it brought me little red indicators of where the group homes are 15 miles away from where I was in Minneapolis. So further down the list, you can click intermediate care facility only. You can click foster care only. You can click DD waiver, CAC waiver, CADI waiver, brain injury waiver, et cetera. And you can just see at the very top, Joy Living or Eco Green Corporation are two providers that popped up, of many providers in this list that potentially have an opening in that residence, in that community residential setting. So that's one place to look for openings through the MCCP website. Another place is using the housing link, housinglink.org, for a regular typical apartment, a rental property. This is also an option that you can sort. You can sort by distance, how much rent you want to pay, how many bedrooms there are, the kind of building it is, if they accept subsidized housing or not, if it's a building for seniors or people with disabilities. I guess one of the important pieces of this too is that you can register your email, and if there's ever subsidized or Section 8 waiting lists that are open, they'll notify you, and you can go apply for Section 8. Section 8 is reduced income-based facilities where you pay 1/3 of your income as rent. So if you pay $300 a month, you pay $100. There's various kinds of income-based programs. They're very competitive and hard to find sometimes, but if you registered your email here, they would send you a list on when there's an opening. So you have to be looking in the paper every day. You could just watch your email and see when that comes up. So that can be a helpful way to find a typical apartment in a neighborhood looking for. MinnesotaHelp.info is the way that we find providers. And so if you're looking for a provider in Minnesota that offers integrated community supports, that offers a specific waivered service, you can enter it under what are we looking for, enter integrated community support and where. You could put Minneapolis, you could put your city, you could put Hennepin County. And this next page gives an example. I entered integrated community supports in Hennepin County, and there was 142 results that came up. The first one was Episcopal Group Homes. I know that they are an agency that is offering integrated community supports because we just met with them recently and they talked about what they wanted to do. They're not a large company, but they are offering that service. So there are 142 results. You can choose and call to see where they are in the process of delivering that particular service. If it's not integrated community support, maybe you look for home delivered meals, or maybe you look for respite, or maybe you look for some other waiver service that you're interested in. So that's MinnesotaHelp.info. How will you pay for the staff support necessary? How will you pay for the staff support necessary? So we talked a little bit about the services available, and this is one of those hard to read ones, but I'm going to tell you about all these services and give you an easy way to find the definitions for all the services. So when you think of how to pay for staff support, that is waivered money. Paying for staff is home and community-based waiver, that pays for staff. You're going to pay for rent, that is Social Security and other money we're going to talk about in a little bit. So maybe you're going to look at night supervision. That could be an option. If you're living in your own apartment, you can have night supervision. You could have 24-hour emergency assistance. That might be an agreement with somebody to come over if you needed to go to a hospital sometime, or if you needed to step away sometime, or it could be somebody that lives with you and provides that 24-hour emergency assistance as well. There's electronic monitoring. There are ways that you can put monitors in the bed, and you don't have a camera, but you can sense when the person's in the bed, when they're out of the bed, when the front door opened, when it closed, when the refrigerator is open or closed, when the stove is on or off. All these things that might make sense to you or be more appropriate for you could be added in addition to cameras if you wanted to do that, but it's not always cameras, it's all these other sensing devices as well. Home delivered meals could be an option. I mentioned earlier a service called live-in caregiver expenses. So you can live in your own apartment, you can have a staff that lives in the apartment with you. That staff's rent and food can be paid through the waiver. We divide the number of people living in the apartment by 2. If there's 2 people, 1/2 of the rent and 1/2 of the food is paid through the waiver. the money is given to the guardian, it's given to the staff, it's given to the person somehow to get to the person to pay for the expense. That's a really creative, out of the box way to provide natural supports or paid supports. And it's a good incentive for people. Can you imagine if you had a college student that was going to be gone during the daytime and they had a free place to live and free food? Wow, that'd be nice. Homemaker services and more. There's also group homes called community residential settings, and then integrated community support that we talked about. In addition to waivered services, and I'm going to show you a way to find all these services and to find a whole page description about all of them so you can learn more about them. There are medical assistance funded services that aren't waiver paid called ARMS, Rehabilitative Mental Health Services. And so these are paid in addition to waivered services. These might be a staff that would come over from an ARMS organization and help the person that might have mental health issues or need help with problem solving, need help with maybe feeling better about themselves, need help with scheduling medical appointments or things like that. And so that's over and above waivered services and can be really help to enhance things a little bit more. Customized living, we talked a little bit about that before. That's not a waivered service. It's a building where people have food provided to them either in their apartment or in a congregate setting with their housemates. There's nursing available in the building. There are other supports like therapies and help with medication and all these other things that you need. And then employment options can help pay for can help pay for staffing as well, or can help give you less time you need for staffing, because if you're on the job, often you don't necessarily need staffing if you're doing something you really like to do and are really good at. So just an idea. One of my favorite resources is the Disability Services Program Manual. Disability Services Program Manual. I got to know this really well when I was at ARC Greater Twin Cities, again, 30 years ago, we'll say, close to that, 20 years ago, it's hard to say. And it was one of the first things that everything that was about the waiver was in writing. And you could dive down and hear about the service within the waiver, and you can find out what the law is and what the description of the service is. So I do this by Googling Minnesota DHS DD waiver or Minnesota DHS CADI waiver if you have a CADI waiver. And it's one of the first things that comes up. It's Disability Services Program Manual. I have the DD waiver as an example. This is what you see. And then later in the page, you see all the services that are offered through the DD waiver. This is only part of the services. We talked about a few of them. We talked about 24-hour emergency assistance. We talked about caregiver living expenses. We talked about homemaker, which is later on the list. But each of these is a service of the waiver, and you can click on each definition, and a whole page is going to open up and describe that service. You can study that, you can learn more about it, you can see if your provider's offering what they're supposed to be offering, you can see if your case manager is knowledgeable about the service. And again, through this Waiver Reimagine project, which is listed at the very top, it says that DHS is streamlining some services in the service menu, and the services below have already been streamlined. So if you could click on them, later on, it'll talk about integrated community support. It'll talk about individualized housing support with and without training. You can find out what that service really means and what the provider is supposed to do. So I hope that's helpful to you. It's been one of the most helpful documents that I found with DHS. I try and share it all the time as much as I can. Now, the money part. Money part is never fun. But the good news is that there are funds available in licensed settings, community residential settings, to help the person pay for rent and food. And there's money available in non-licensed settings like your own home to help the person pay for rent and food. So we're going to talk about some of those things right now and talk about how to get those. So again, we have another list that's hard to read, but I'm going to try and explain it to you a little bit more. These are many of the ways you can get more money or more resources to help a person in a group home or in a residential setting. We're going to talk a lot about Minnesota Supplemental Aid and MSA housing assistance in a minute. That's money that's available for people living in their own home. Housing support funds are money that's available for people living in a group home or a community residential setting to pay for their rent and their food. And Social Security. Those are the three big funding streams that pay for rent and food in apartments and in group homes. Retirement Survival Disability Insurance, RSDI, is another form basically of Social Security. It's a higher amount because it looks at the parent's retirement history, and often it's a higher reimbursement amount. So you can also pay for rent and food by having a job. There's also a great program called Fair for All. I don't know if anybody's heard of Fair for All. You can Google it. I love Google. Fair for All. It's a program. You pay about $20. You get $40 worth of fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats. There's a warehouse in New Hope that's open every other Monday you can shop at. You can use an electronics benefits card to shop there if you wanted to. There's a website, fairforall.org, and you can list your zip code and they'll tell you community centers or churches that are offering packages of Fair for All food. You can buy 1 package, 2 packages, 3 packages, 4 or more. And they also have specialties where they might have a meat package or a vegetable package. And when there's holidays, they'll have turkey and other kinds of things, and they'll have menus to kind of teach you how to use those foods. So Fair for All is a really great way to get more bang for your buck, to get more money for food. Free phones are available through government programs. One I have listed here is called qlinkwireless.org. qlinkwireless.org. You go on that website, you fill in that you are open to Social Security, you're on public benefits. They ask you what kind of benefits you're on. So if you're on Section 8, if you're open to a waiver, if you're open to medical assistance, those are all things that count. And in turn, you get a free phone with unlimited minutes and unlimited text for a whole year. At the end of the year, you'll get a text or a phone call from the company, and they'll ask you, do you still qualify? Are you still open to these benefits? And you indicate, yes, you are. And then the free benefit, the free phone service, will be available for another year. Q-Link Wireless and these phones are available 1 phone per household. So if you have housemates, only one of the housemates would be qualified for the phone. The other housemates would not be qualified for the phone. There's energy assistance grants in Minnesota. Usually about May or June, you want to apply for the fall because there's a limited amount of money available. You can Google Minnesota Energy Resources or Energy Assistance Grants, and there's an application that will come up, and then based on your income, you will get a grant so you don't have to pay so much for electricity or heat in the winter. We talked a little bit earlier about home delivered meals. And so you can get 1 meal a day, 7 days a week. They could be fresh from Meals on Wheels. They could be fresh for the week from a local organization that cooks the meals and delivers them fresh without being frozen. Or they could be frozen, and maybe you have 2 or 3 weeks meals in a package that's delivered from other places like Iowa, or I think Idaho, or other places. And so these are usually microwave meals, unless you have Meals on Wheels that are fresh and hot. The other ones are microwaved, and that just decreases some cost if you're not a good cook, or if it's maybe not the best idea for you to be using a hot stove. You could have home delivered meals. Talked a little bit about caregiver living expenses, also having a roommate. And then some ways, there's some programs that are income-based. And so based on your income, Section 8, Section 811, and Section 42 are 3 programs that you would pay 1/3 of your income towards rent. They're highly competitive. There's not a lot of openings, but occasionally I get notices from the state of Minnesota that there's some apartments available on Lake Minnetonka, as an example, and the rent is $200 a month. And so we look for people that have a high need and try and fill those locations with people that maybe have a low income or might be homeless or have other needs as well. So I'm going to talk more specifically about money that you can get through the state of Minnesota and how to get it. So if your son or daughter lives in a group home, a community residential setting, they can, with your social worker, apply for housing support. Housing support used to be called Group Residential Housing, or GRH. You might hear that more often, but the official name is housing support, and it's $1,041 a month. In addition to their Social Security amount that pays for rent and food in a group home. So 3 meals a day, toiletries, all those things, plus rent and food is paid through housing support. If you live in your own home, you can have MSA, Minnesota Supplemental Aid. That's about $100 a month. It changes every year. It might be a little over 100 now, but it's about $100 a month. It's very underutilized. And so you should check into that. And then if you live in your own home, not with mom and dad, but if you live in your own home, have your own address, you can also get Minnesota Supplemental Aid Housing Assistance, MSA Housing Assistance, and that amount is $421. In addition to the 100 from supplemental aid, you have about $521 in addition to your Social Security. So if you had $780 or $800 in Social Security, you would get, $500 more. And if you had a housemate, you'd have double that. And so you can find a place to live, and it would help you with your expenses. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So housing support, this is the one that's meant for group homes or community residential settings, the amount that's $1,041. It pays for room and board costs. It pays for rent and utility expenses, and sometimes it can pay for additional support services for people with certain needs, like maybe budgeting or certain meals, special prescribed meals, those kinds of things. Housing support is paid directly to the provider. So the person with a disability and or the family doesn't see the money. It goes in a check right to the provider. The application is typically completed by the provider or the case manager, not very often by the family. So the provider or the case manager will take care of that. Make sure you qualify. To qualify for housing support, you need to be eligible for Social Security or general assistance. You need to have a low income and assets below $2,000, or if you have general assistance, below $10,000. So the qualifications are pretty limited. A lot of people qualify for this. Even people that are homeless would qualify for this, and then it opens up this funding for the whole building. Here's an example. The state will pay up to $1,041 if people have accountable income like their Social Security. They contribute that to the amount that the state would provide, and the state provides the difference. So they're not always going to give people $1,041. They're going to give you the difference between your Social Security and $1,041. If you pay your Social Security 100% to the provider, everyone gets $104 in personal needs money per month. So there's a little incentive here if you're living in a group home or a licensed community residential setting. You don't have a lot of discretionary money available. Granted, all of your meals are paid, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and your toiletries are paid as well. But you get $104 a month to go to Aruba or to spend on clothes or toothpaste and other kinds of things that you might need. So another example, if a person does not have any income at all, they don't have Social Security, well, they just don't have any income. The state will pay $1,041 total for rent and food, and they will give the person $104 in personal needs. The housing support money pays for food, linen, laundry, housekeeping, maintenance of the building, etc. So if you have no money, you can still qualify for housing support and live in a community residential setting, and you get $100 paid to you. So if you want to live in your own home, as an example, you're going to rent an apartment, you're going to buy a condominium in a neighborhood, you're going to have maybe You're going to maybe have 3 apartments in a large building. You can have your friends live in other apartments nearby. You can apply for an MSA, Minnesota Supplemental Aid. The criteria are that you need to be 18 years old, receive Social Security, or that you would receive Social Security, but you have excess income, or you're over 65, blind or disabled. So the primary criteria here are that you are open to Social Security and you're an adult. So if you had Social Security, say it's $780 or $800, you get about $100 from MSA, you'd have another $100, you'd have $880. There's some additional things that people could access through MSA. You can pay for a representative payee. The MSA will pay $25 a month. You could pay for a guardian or conservative fees up to $100 a month. And we mentioned this earlier, if you have a special diet that's prescribed by a doctor, there's certain amounts that MSA could also pay towards that special diet, not to pay for 100% of the food, but to displace the expense of the more expensive food, the difference in the more expensive food that you're needing to purchase. MSA housing assistance goes with MSA. So you must be eligible for a Minnesota Supplemental Aid first. You must be under age 65 when you apply, and you must have housing costs that are more than 40% of your income. That's not hard to have. Your income is $800 through Social Security, and your rent is $400 or $500 or $300. You're paying more than 40% of your gross income anyway. So you have to first have MSA, be under 65, and have housing costs that are more than 40% of your income. In addition, you could be relocating from a hospital or nursing home, and it's not and, it's or. So one of these. Or be eligible for PCA, doesn't mean you have to receive it, means you have to be screened and eligible for it, or receiving waivered services. So if you are under age 65, you're using more than 40% of your income for rent, you are leaving a hospital or nursing home or an intermediate care facility, or you're eligible for PCA, or you're receiving waivered services, you can get $421 through MSA housing assistance. So then you'll have $521 total. You'll have about $1,300 to spend on rent. And then if you had a housemate, you'd have double that, $2,600 to spend on rent. And that can be helpful. In addition, you can get some food support benefits. It won't be a lot. I'm not sure how much, but it won't be a lot, but you can get some additional food support benefits. So the way this works, if your Social Security is $780 or $800, you get MSA, $100, you get housing assistance, $414 for a total of $1,301. Your MSA housing assistance will come to you on your electronics benefits card. If you have food support, you get a little card that looks like an automatic teller machine, an ATM card. It's an electronics benefits card. During the month, your money will come on that card. You can withdraw it twice for free. If you have a payee, instead of being your own payee, a check will be written to the payee, and the payee can cash that check and use that money for rent and food or whatever else you need. It doesn't have to be rent and food. Logically, it should be for rent and food, but if you needed other things, the state's not checking. And so you could use it for other needed things you need for living as well. So that's a lot about funding. Two primary funding streams are housing support, formerly group residential housing, that pays for group homes or community residential settings that are licensed, including some of the programs like customized living and others. And you have Minnesota Supplemental Aid and Minnesota Supplemental Aid Housing Assistance that pays for, increases your income to pay for rent and to pay for food in your own apartment. Getting towards the end, so I think we'll have some room for questions. We're not quite done, but we're getting closer. If you want to manage some money, there was a really great option that became law in Minnesota several years ago called an ABLE account. And so if you have a son or a daughter that had a disability before age 26, they can save money and they can have a balance up to $100,000, and they're excluded from the Social Security resource limit. So people ask, well, what am I going to do if I want to buy a house in the future? What am I going to do if I wanted to participate in education? You know, go to an expensive program like like Bethel Build program or some other program. These are ways to save money for the future. The maximum annual contribution is $15,000. There's a website there, savewithable.com, that you can look at and give you more information about ABLE accounts. There's some income-based housing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's very competitive. There's not a lot of openings in income-based housing, but it does happen. A person I volunteer with, who I've volunteered with for 20 years, has Section 8 right now, and he pays $250 for rent. He lives in a nice building on the edge of Plymouth and Golden Valley. He's been there for many, many years, and it gives him the flexibility to buy things that he really wants to buy with his extra income. So that's called Section 8. He has Section 8, which is tied to a building. There's also a Section 8 voucher, which you can take with you and go anywhere in the United States. It's a national program. You can go in the metro area or anywhere in the United States. Sometimes people are finding it hard to find providers, to find landlords that take Section 8 vouchers or that offer Section 8. Section 811 is another program through HUD. And again, you pay 1/3 of your income for rent. Section 42 is a low income tax credit, which again, you pay 1/3 of your income for rent. There are some programs called Bridges Rental Assistance Program when you're leaving an institutional setting. So I worked with a person that's at St. Peter Regional Security Hospital, and he was using a whole wing of the hospital. He had a 3-to-1 staff ratio. He accessed 2 Bridges Rental Assistance grants at the same time to accommodate his moving to Oakdale into a house in a neighborhood. His parents were very involved and lived in the area and visited him often, and he wanted to move back to that area. So that made it possible for him to do that. This is one of the people that I work with. He's a person that his mom and it's actually his brother and his sister. His brother got married, his sister moved out, and he said, "Mom, when am I going to move? What's happening with me, Mom and Dad?" And so they got a little anxious, and they started learning and went to trainings about support services, and they did a couple things. They started one project and that didn't quite work, so they started another one, but they found this great home in South Minneapolis, which I say is in the perfect triangle between mom and dad and a relative and another relative. And so this gentleman is so busy, you have to schedule time with him because he is really, really busy. I scheduled time with his dad and he to have breakfast one day, and he's just living the life. He works at Carboni's Pizza. He has a girlfriend. He had a garden at his mom's and dad's house. He gave me a yellow tomato when I visited, and we can talk about gardening because I have a big garden at my house too, and it was really fun. He's on an intramural basketball team as well. And he's a person that I like to talk about because he wanted to be a policeman. And he had a person-centered planning to say, "Oh, you want to be a policeman?" And you kind of look on the floor and go, "No, he wants to be a policeman. Uh-oh." But somebody within the person-centered group knew about a community liaison program through Minneapolis. And he participated in that great community liaison program, and he successfully passed the test. And he got a uniform and those bright orange gloves and a cool hat and that bright flashlight. He can direct crowds during the summer or whenever there's large crowds and public events, and he's part of that. So in essence, he became a policeman. And he's helping and supporting the community. So that's successful. He uses live-in caregiver expenses. He has a roommate, and his mom and dad really wanted him to have a roommate that was more of a peer rather than a boss. We don't want bosses for our roommates, do we? We don't want that. But they wanted that peer to be a live-in caregiver to help and assist and teach and train him, but to be equal. And so with those instructions, he's had a live-in caregiver for a long time, and that really works well. He's able to afford his rent and food, and the live-in caregiver's rent and food is paid through the waiver as well. He has a phone through a free phone program that we talked about. He uses Fare for All, so he gets discounted food when he needs it, and he's living the life in his own apartment. And his brother and his sister are jealous. This is my contact information, 763-360-9307, or my email, jerry.mellum@hennepin.us. It's as simple as that. Emails are really good for me because they don't go away. Phone calls sometimes are tough, but if you email me, you have a better chance of a comprehensive answer because it's easier to attach things. If you call me, I might ask you to email me anyway, so I can attach some resources to your information. So I guess we have time for questions if you have some questions. Or I could talk some more too, it doesn't matter. I have other presentations.
Yeah, we do have one question in our chat.
Okay.
2 questions for ICS. What does the certification mean or do for ICS? And how do they determine the amount of one-on-one hours that are provided?
Sure. The certification is something the provider does. They approach a building, they register with the Department of Human Services, they become a certified provider of that building, and it means that no other provider in that building can offer integrated community supports except that provider that certified the building. The way they determine the budget, so it doesn't really do much for the people living there, it just says I can live in a certified building. It's more to recognize that provider as the provider that's providing services in that building. You can have other services in the building. You can have own home. You can have in-home services with mom and dad. You can live with a friend. That supports, as we described, you would have to use that provider that certified the building. How do they determine the number of 1-to-1? It's based on the MnChoice's assessment, primarily based on your assessed need, based on not based on bathing, dressing, grooming. That's a separate assessment. That's PCA. It's based on the amount of time you need for teaching you to cook, teaching you to ride the bus, teaching you skills. It's a skill building kind of a service, not direct care. So it's a little different. Again, we're trying to get our hands around it. And not a lot of providers have certified buildings. They're in the process. It takes some time. They've got a couple more months left before there's any pressure on them. But it's a brand new service, basically, through Wave and Reimagine.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is kind of related to ICS as well. Just, are there financial supports for that? I know you talked about the licensed and you talked about the own home, but what is there for integrated community service?
It's one of those unique services, and it's either going to be housing support or MSA housing assistance. Depending on the provider must have a contract with Hennepin County to offer housing support, which is that group home kind of service. If they don't have a contract with Hennepin County, they can't use housing support. So they'd probably be using MSA housing assistance and MSA for the person to displace the amount of rent they have. Providers that have contracts with Hennepin County for housing support could offer that. And they just say, we need your Social Security check and we're going to pay the difference through housing support.
Jerry, are you familiar with any health-related college curricula in the area in whose students might benefit from interacting with people with developmental disabilities? We've always thought it might be a good way to engage those students with our adult daughter.
Sure. There are 2 programs for transition age folks and one is through Children's Hospital, where they actually train people with disabilities in Children's Hospital to work. And then they're not guaranteeing a job, but they could interview for a job if they needed to. There's a special name for that, and I can't think of it right now, but if you, I'll try and include that. I'll talk to one of my coworkers and try and include that information as well. So Tracy has a question.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Tracy.
For kids who don't qualify for Social Security during their minority period, there's a period of time that it takes them to get to Social Security eligible. How do you invoke the county's person-centered planning while you're in that gap time?
That's an excellent question. I hope you call me tomorrow or email me tomorrow, because we have money available in Henry County to pay for person-centered planning. If you have a case manager through developmental disabilities or the CADI waiver, we have money. Please, please, please take our money. And if you have waivered services, we can access that through the waiver. If you don't have waivered services, we can access that through county funding. And we need to use that money, otherwise it goes away. So person-centered planning funds, you can contract through Star Services through that money, or ARC Minnesota.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll contact you tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Yay. I love giving money away.
Great. Another question from the chat. How does a parent qualify as a caregiver so they can access some of these funds?
Sure. There's a really good bulletin that just defined the services parents can get paid for as a caregiver and services they cannot get paid for as a caregiver. So that's pretty exciting. For parents of children less than 18, there's a program called Consumer Support Grant, which is a part of PCA services. There's a waivered service program called Consumer Directed Community Support, where you can get paid to provide care. It's not the parent paid program. It's the program that allows parents to be and spouses to be paid because people need skilled, trained staff. As the person becomes an adult, through consumer directed community support, you would just be a staff and you can get paid. There's also services through individualized housing support with or without training now that you can get paid as well. And so in that bulletin, it kind of explains that. Things you cannot get paid for, a respite or 24-hour emergency assistance. There's some, or live-in caregiver can't be a relative. So there's some things you can't get paid for, but there are a short list of things you can get paid for now. Please let me know if you have questions. I'd be happy to answer those. Just send me an email. I'll send you a link to that bulletin.
Any other questions in the room?
Well, I don't have a question, but many of us don't have a social worker that knows more than we do.
Yeah.
In fact, many are less. So that's a problem.
So I usually advise people to develop a relationship with the social worker supervisor, because often the social worker supervisor has been there longer and might have more resources or more information. Carbon copy of the supervisor on emails you're sending as well. You do have a choice of case managers. So if what isn't working out, you can choose another one, but I know it's a challenge because contracted case managers are coming and going pretty quickly. These trainings were started in 1987 as an alternative to case management. So you can get information that's consistent across the board. If your case manager was busy or didn't have the expertise in a certain area, you would at least have a community training to attend to learn about supported decision-making or waivered services or housing or vocational service options. So the trainings are on YouTube videos as well as in person.
I have a question.
Yep.
So most of what you were talking about is through the state stuff. Is there anything that's specific to different counties?
There are. Each county, Ramsey County, Dakota County, Henry County, have different quote unquote personalities or different missions and visions. So Dakota County, as an example, tends to be a little bit more flexible. They're doing things that other counties might not do. Ramsey County tends to be a little bit less flexible, maybe, or more conservative. Henry County is flexible enough, but we have the largest county in the whole state of Minnesota, so we have a lot of resources, but we also have a lot of people we need to balance it with. So in Henry County specifically, we have that person-centered planning money available in a grant that other counties might not have. We also have a program called It's Working, where you can develop a program in a consumer-directed manner, which means you're the employer. You can hire and train the staff, write the plan, set the range of pay up to, I don't know, around $20 an hour or more, depending on the skills of the staff person, and include things like discovery or micro businesses, or help develop an internet site, or purchase uniforms or things like that. And so that's something Hennepin County has done to help us learn how to be as creative as possible to inform the larger funding streams like waiver about what might be possible. Dakota County has a program similar to that, where they have people design all their programs vocationally, where they can use licensed traditional services, or they can use a consumer-directed model as well. So each county has different personalities and different programs available that are paid through county funds, typically, not waiver. If it's waiver funds, those are rules set by the state of Minnesota we all need to follow. If it's county funds, those are the most flexible funds available.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Jerry, are you willing to come back?
I do.
Oh, first question was, Jerry, are you willing to come back as needed? And then we'll get to the last question.
Yes, I am.
Yes, okay. Jim, go ahead.
Jerry, do all of the counties out here have a fellow that is knowledgeable and helpful like yourself?
No.
I don't know.
I'm in Rice County, and it's relatively conservative here. And is there anybody I can call who knows these things and is willing to share like you do?
You know, I know a lot of people in a lot of counties. I could probably find somebody in a Rice County. Monday, I'm going to be on a meeting with all the counties in the state of Minnesota talking about consumer-directed community support. So I get to meet a lot of people. And so let me do some searching. Are you looking for a specific topic or just everything?
Well, Jerry, I started this a long time ago. My son is 28 years old, and we bought a house for him 12 years ago.
Great.
And we got licensed as a group home with a local service provider and opened that group home 1 month before the moratorium was put on. Literally 1 month before the moratorium. I'm assuming that moratorium is still holding solid.
It ebbs and flows. It's pretty solid. Sometimes there's a little break in the clouds for a period of time, then it goes back to being solid again. So
yeah, so I started this journey quite in advance, but it changes so often and so drastically that it's easy to get left in the dust, even with the best intentions, even with the best investments. It's really easy to get left in the dust. I know when they put the moratorium on us, it completely changed the way everything went. However, we were able to get the house licensed under a local service provider as a group home. So there's 4 people that live in it. And are there any other options for a house to be licensed other than through a service provider or as an adult foster care? Adult foster care is very tricky.
Right. Yes. I mean, the short answer is yes, there are. I'd love to have a conversation with you. If you want to give me a call, I'll answer your question. But again, housing is so individual. You really have to have a conversation with each family about their specific situation. We can share information globally, which helps a lot, but you have to really talk about what's happening with your situation.
I'll get a hold of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, for your time. Really appreciate your expertise, and people can follow up with you. And I'm sure that there will be many more questions and more conversations to be had. So thank you for being accessible for that.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thanks for your flexibility tonight.
It's not just the slides, but his talk.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We have it recording. I think I missed the first 2 minutes,
That's
but But we're good. So thank you. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone
Good night. Bye-bye.
online.
Thank you so much.
Yep, we're going to share all this information, the slides, the recording, everything. So stay tuned for that.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.